Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity to present my paper here. And my paper here is a humble attempt to analyze the comic stories in children's magazines in Malayalam using the Transitivity system network in Halliday's systemic functional linguistics. So I'll start with why I have selected children's magazines. Because there are a lot of scientific studies on the interest and motivations of children. How do they attain knowledge and information from what they are reading? So one of that studies states that from the Children's Literature Association, it accentuates that the information gathered by children through reading influences their worldview as well as the moral standards. So we know that children who reads comic books and any kind of textbooks have a lot of questions to ask. They always prefer the cultural information, and we often find it difficult to answer their questions of what, why, and when. Right? So the information they gather through reading and through their environment affects their moral standards and worldview, and also the literacy rates of the children when they grow up. So in a recent event, I have seen a social media post which portrays the beauty standards. It is a textbook, a picture from the textbook which gives a norm of aesthetics as a. It shows that a picture of a white woman is shown as the beautiful one, and a black woman is shown as ugly. And another event is a picture where the norm of family is represented as a male person and a male kid is sitting in a sofa playing games, while a female person, probably mother, and a female kid is working in the kitchen. So that is how the general roles are represented. I'm talking about a school textbook. And there are recent developments which are more positive, which shows the norms of family as a man and man can be a family, women and women can be a family. Such kind of pictures are shown in students' textbooks. So what I am talking is about student textbook, which students or children as if they normally hesitate to read, right? So when it comes to comic stories and comic books and all the children's magazines, they have fond of these textbooks. So we cannot imagine what kinds of things are there in this textbooks which can affect the worldview of the children who is reading that. And therefore, a research is necessary to analyze the choice of words and its influence on the readers, to provide a civilized, unbiased, humanitarian storytelling experience to children. Unfortunately, these lexical choices and differences can be studied using Halliday's systemic functional linguistics. There is a framework called Transitivity Analysis Framework where we can analyze the lexical choices in different textbooks. So in systemic functional linguistics, the language analysis is functional rather than formal. So that we can analyze the text in social context, and we can analyze the choice of words by the authors, which gives the children information and knowledge about the world they are in. And of course, I have used the. Of course, here is a glimpse of the literatural review which I have used. It's systemic functional linguistics. It was proposed by Halliday, and Rukia Hassan, J.R. Martin, and CMIM Matheson are the proponents who extended the systemic functional linguistics framework. And if we move on to the applications of the systemic functional linguistics as a methodology, there has been a lot of descriptions of language, including French, German, Vietnamese, Chinese, and my co-presenter, who is not here, he is working on describing the language of Marathi using the systemic functional linguistics. And if we move on to the recent developments or recent applications using the systemic functional linguistics, we can find a lot of articles online which are systemic functional interpretation of transitivity templates in news reports. News reports were analyzed, and one of the eye-catchy one was the Beatles. Herbie has analyzed the transitivity process in popular songs by the Beatles. She tried to analyze how the Beatles has employed different processes in their lyrical writing of their popular songs in order to communicate their experiences of the world. There have been a lot of research on systemic functional linguistics, and the applications are worldwide. So I'll move on to stories in children's stories in Malayalam magazines. There are a lot of Malayalam magazines currently being published, almost 20. And the three famous ones are Balrama, Balabhumi, and Minnamini, which I have taken here to analyze the text. So if we go on searching for researches that are done in children's literature, we will find that only few of the researches are done in children's literature. And the reason being, as stated by Noorin Nida, she is a PhD scholar from Center for Women's Studies, University of Hyderabad. She states that children's literature as a category is often related to the position of minor, and of course which can be the reason for the lack of research in this category, and only a few of researches has been done in children's literature, and some of them was Nandini Chandra's The Classic Pauper Amarchitragada, which delves into the core issues of communalism and history writing. It stimulates the troubling potentials of Amarchitragada and a force in modern Indian history. The other one is Deepa Srinivasa's two of the articles which portrays the history masculinity in Amarchitragada, and based on a series which is a set of stories for children published in a series called Different Tales. She tried to analyze the series, which is set in minority communities, how they depict the complex ways in which children negotiate and cope with the material conditions of their marginality. So, as I have researched, this current paper is a most innovative exploration of the Malayalam language using systemic functional linguistics. So, I have employed more the qualitative and quantitative methodologies for language analysis here. As I have said, systemic functional linguistics as a methodology in itself is a qualitative tool for analysis. It can analyze the clauses in text in context. It divides the clauses into different components and analyzes theme, voice, mood, circumstances, and participants. So I have used Halliday's transitivity system network, which is a theory I have used in which I have used in analyzing the text here. So in Halliday's transitivity system network, there are three notions, which is the participants, who are the participants of the current situation, circumstances are the circumstances that are dwelling in the current situation, and the transitivity processes, which are related to the work processes. And Halliday distinguishes 6 types of processes in English, which are material, mental, relational, behavioral, verbal, as well as existential processes. And I have tried to employ and apply these 6 kind of processes into Malayalam language to find out what kind of processes are there in Malayalam language using the comic stories in children's magazines in Malayalam. So, for that, I have selected around 3 magazines, which is Balrama, Malabhumi, and Minamini, according to the popularity among kids. And I have selected 5 different stories from each of the magazines. I have tried to analyze these stories. I formed a corpus of 800 texts which are in context from these comic strips, and I have analyzed both qualitatively and quantitatively to find out the process types, participant types, circumstances, the theme, voice, and mood of the text. So, moving on to the qualitative analysis. So, here is a fragment of the comic story Mimu from Minamini. Minamini is a children's magazine. So, what I have tried to analyze is I have divided the comics books I have taken into pre-COVID and during COVID, just to find out whether there is any difference in circumstances or participants in these comic stories during COVID-19, if the authors have employed any difference to the circumstances in during COVID-19 than the stories which were employed before COVID-19 pandemic. So here is a fragment, and it is a story of an elephant who is hungry and who was walking towards a shop asking for bananas. So the story I have, these are the components of the story. These are the clauses that confined to the story. The first one is Orikal Orana Kadayile Padakula Kandapol Avade Ninnu, which is loosely translated to one day an elephant stopped at a shop seeing bananas. So I have divided this clause into 2 parts, which is theme and rhyme, where theme is the point of departure, where theme talks about the elephant who is stopping there. And I have analyzed the using transitivity system network, which of course the verb is stopped and it is a material process because it is regarding the action. And seeing bananas is a kind of mental action, so it is kind of material process. Likewise, I have analyzed all the 800 texts which I have gathered through all the 3 comic magazines. And using the analysis, I have found out the processes of theme, voice, mood, and circumstances. Of course, theme is an important component of the course. It acts as the point of departure of the discourse. For example, this is taken from one of the comic magazines, This is part of the this is part of story called Mayavi. Which says Lutapi omelette tinnu, which means Lutapi ate the omelette. Lutapi is the theme there. That is the point of departure. And of course, when we are analyzing the theme, we have to mark the variations in clause based on voice. And of course, if you are going to the English version of active and passive voice binaries, it doesn't usually applies to the Dravidian language as opined by Dr. Prakasham in his metaphysical profile of Telugu. So what I have noticed is if you are applying the passive active voice constructions here, we can find that they are more of written, they are more found in written text rather than in spoken varieties. So we won't usually say the passive version of Lutapi ate the omelette is the omelette was eaten by Lutapi, right? So we won't usually say the passive version. What is it? Omelette, Lutapiyal Tinnapattu. We won't say that in day-to-day conversation. It is already a written variety. So, for the better understanding, I have applied Halliday's notion of operative receptive orientation to this active active passive voice construction. So, from the text I have analyzed, I have found that the main participants or the characters of the story are usually part of the theme, and they usually come in the nominal groups. So in the nominal groups, there are these participants as well as their characteristics, mostly in the form of adjectives. It is followed by the theme, which is usually the actions done by these participants, which is in form of verbal groups and the adverbials. So I have seen that in stories where the circumstances are forest, animals are the characteristics, main participants, and if the circumstances are around homes, schools, hospitals, etc., the participants are human beings. And of course, mood is a second component. Mood is an element. Mood in a clause constitutes the meaning of the clause in the acts of exchange. So if you are in a conversation, if we cannot understand the mood, we won't get the word, the exchange of words are intended to understand, right? So in the case of Malayalam, there are a lot of verbless constructions. Like we use markers like ano, etc., using a rising and falling tone to provide the text with a mode of asking question. For example, when I am asking Avan Mandana, it is a rising tone. Is he a fool? It is a rising tone. And when I am asking Avana Mandan, it uses another marker and it is also a rising tone. And we can understand from this in Malayalam language, questions are usually asked with a rising tone, whereas declarations or statements are made with falling tones. So in mood as a system network in English, it contains declaratives, imperatives, interrogatives, and exclamatives. As well in Malayalam, it contains declarative, interrogative, and imperatives. It comes under the polarizable clauses. For example, these are the declarative: once an elephant abducted Mowgli, imperatives, and interrogatives: Jingo, are you going? Which ask a question. So these come under the polarizable clauses, and these suggestives, hortatives, exclamative, optatives, vocatives, and quotients comes under the non-polarizable clauses. So as I have obtained in the mood. So again, the voice, as I have said, we cannot actually distinguish the active passive voice constructions in spoken Malayalam, because you usually tend to change the word order here. For example, I will ask if I am saying Lutapi omelette tinnu, which is active voice as per the traditional norm, which Halliday calls it operative. Lutapi ate the omelette. So what usually Malayalam speakers will tend to do is they'll just change the word order. They'll say omelette Lutapi tinnu. This is again correct, and we will get a tint of passiveness in that, but it's not exactly passive, which Halliday called receptive. So such types of orientations Halliday called operative receptives, and we can find a lot in Malayalam language, spoken language. So of course, these passive voice, active voice are seen in Malayalam textbooks, which I have seen in the comic stories too. So as I have said, this if you are going with the active voice, passive voice norms, active voice constructions are more seen in comic stories than passive voice. So it is directly spoken. And moving on to the circumstances. So in Halliday's transitivity system network, there is circumstances, there are participants, and there is this processes according to the verbs. And these circumstances, as I have noticed, before pandemic, there are almost nil words like quarantine, lockdown, social distance, obviously, because these things are new to the world, right? So after this COVID-19 pandemic and the stories written during the pandemic, these circumstances of quarantine, lockdown, social distancing, hand washing, etc., and the participants like police, the government, doctors, etc., are seen. And the circumstances are mostly seen from schools and playgrounds to indoor activities and indoor games. So the texts that I have analyzed, around 800 texts, they are more focused on real world realistic actions. And the storytellers are, of course, it is, I have analyzed the comic strips which are pictorial representations, and the context is seen from the pictures. So we have to analyze the context from pictures, and they have employed a dialogic and verbal narration, which will potentially analyze the young readers. So this is all about the qualitative analysis I have done. It talks about the theme, the voice, circumstances, and voice and mood of the comic stories in Malayalam. So from the qualitative data I have analyzed, I have quantified the number of processes, 6 different types of processes and participants, and tried to find out the frequencies in 3 different magazines before pandemic and during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I also compared and contrasted among the magazines also. So this is about the process types. So it is evident from the charts that verbal process types are the more frequent process types which are in all of the 3 magazines. So when I have tried to find in totality also, verbal process types are more found. And there is a difference in case with the Minna Mini. This is a magazine which, in that case, all the processes are arranged generously rather than confining to a single process types, which is the verbal process types. Unlike the other magazines, Balabhumi and Balarama, they are confined to the 2 verbal processes more, while Minna Mini has a generous distribution of all the 3 processes: material, mental, and verbal processes. So in totality also verbal processes are more occurring than the other any other processes in Balarama, Balabhumi, and Minna Minna, even during COVID-19 and during before the COVID-19. And in totality also, verbal processes are the most occurring process type in all the 3 magazines, which shows that the author has employed verbal conversations between the characters to potentially engage, and it might be more objective if we are employing the verbal conversations, because when their characters who are fond, who the children are fond of talks between each other, so they are more fond of reading it, and they'll get whatever they are talking to. And as I have seen in all these comic stories, most of them are about moral stories, and they have shifted the moral status during the pandemic to how we have to be confined in room spaces during the pandemic, how we have to wash ourselves, how we have to be safe, and the moral stories have shifted their theme to relating to COVID-19 pandemic. That is what I have found. So moving on to the participant types, sayer and targets are the 2 participant types in verbal processes. So it is obvious that the sayer and targets are the more frequent in all the 3 magazines, Balrama, Minnamini, and Balabhumi, before COVID and during the COVID-19 pandemic. So these are the findings, observations or findings I have done through the analysis. Through the qualitative analysis, as I have said, active voice structures, which is operative according to Halliday, are predominant in children's magazines in Malayalam compared to passive voice constructions. And almost all the passive voice constructions, even though it's uncommon, they are unfolding through the time in past tense. And the word order usually marks receptiveness. We just change the word order and the sentence is correct, and it account for the passiveness or the receptiveness. And the main participants of the story are part of the theme. They are mostly in nominal groups. And the nominal groups consisting of such characters who act as a themes usually includes the characteristics of the actors in the form of adjectives, and the theme consists of verbal groups and adverbials. So the circumstances, as I have said, in most of the stories, they have changed into hospitals, things related to COVID-19 pandemics. And as I have said, for the circumstances that are set in forest, the participants are animals, and around homes, schools, hospitals, etc., the characters are human beings. And the moral of the most of the stories have changed into COVID-19 related learnings. So in the quantitative analysis, as I have said, the verbal process type is the more frequent process types in all the three magazines. And Sayer and Targets are the two frequent participants in all the three magazines. The only change I have found is around the circumstances. The circumstances have changed. Instead of schools, playgrounds, and other public places, the writers have changed the focus to homes and thereby indoor activities. So the words like quarantine, lockdown, social distancing, hand washing, mask, fever, etc., which were not mainstream during the starting stage of the pandemic, are found frequently in children's stories during the pandemic. And words like violations, death, police, government, etc., are also seen frequently in stories and are common to all the three magazines during COVID-19. So, in this analysis, I've seen that the authors of the children's comic stories in Malayalam, they have focused more on the real world realistic actions, mostly verbal. They are created using conversations between the participants to potentially engage and mentor the readers. As I have said, in these times of COVID-19 pandemic, the uh, raw materials are limited to children. They are only confined to TV, social media, these comics books, etc. So what they are reading and what they are understanding through these comics, so they will it will really affect the worldview of these children. So that is where this study has prominence. So I will come to the conclusion. I have analyzed children's stories from three popular children's magazines, Balrama, Balbhumi, and Mindamini, taking a total of 90 comic stories. And I have analyzed voice, theme, mood, and circumstances to find out the participants and change in circumstances. I have analyzed them quantitatively to find out the number of process types that are found in the three comic stories and number of participant types to find out in these comic stories. So that's it. That's it.
Thank you, Tilsa, for your wonderful presentation. So this is actually yet again another example of what kind of potential that children's literature holds us for us in India as researchers, and uh, one has to always see that the potential of Indian children's literature has to be utilized still. And I'm not even sure whether we have a category called Indian children's literature. And when you look at it from outside, you always feel as a researcher that it is one of those fascinating areas where, right from its inception to its production to its circulation, adults are very much involved in it. And still, it is always called as innocent literature, children's literature. So there are different terms of references through which one can actually study children's literature, and we are happy that Tilsa has given us another perspective and what kind of change that has come because of the pandemic. That is another wonderful insight that one can draw from her presentation.
I will read out the question posted by Madhu Priya.
Yes.
Her question is: children understand social construction through poem, TV program, comic. So, how gender is portrayed in children's comic or TV program? That is what she has written.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. As I was saying, I have seen in most of the comic strips, which are pictorial representations of the characters or participants that are in the situation. So there is one comic strip called Mayavi, in which the characters, there are female characters as well as the male characters. So the dressings and the doings and actions and of everything that is portrayed with the female and male characters are exactly the reflection of the gender norms that are there in the society. The female characters are seen with the long hairs, the male characters with short hairs, and the dressings also. I think those are the things that I didn't go into in depth because I was analyzing only the cross structure. I didn't go into situations like the pictorial representations, but I'm sure that those representations are the exact reflections or what are there, what the society gives the gender roles as it is. So I think
I think I can add one word to what she was saying because my son is an American citizen. I keep going there and observing him. See, right from the birth of the child, if it is girl, only pink and pink and pink ribbons, pink dresses, pink. if it is boy in blue dresses. So the kind of dress they wear, they make a gender distinction, and also the kind of toys they play with. There is a difference. The parents themselves deliberately, oh, no, you are a boy, no, you cannot play with this. I'll buy you this. So, oh, you are a girl, so ribbons and clips and things like that. So that's how it gets reflected, I think, even in the cartoons that they watch continuously.
Yes, yes.